Now, the other thing is this. We can't know literally the day or the hour, and I'm not proclaiming to know, just so someone doesn't take part of what I'm saying and say, he's saying he knows the day and the hour. What I am saying is this, and I have to say what I am saying as well as what I'm not saying. Okay, now, I believe that there are certain seasons that Messiah is going to intersect human history. I just talked about different seasons. I want you to follow this. There is a time of a hunting season for the Messiah. The first time he came, it was Nisan to Sivan, or April to June, Passover to Shavuot. That's when he came. He came, okay, and he dies at Passover. Passover is fulfilled. Unleavened bread is fulfilled. Fruits is fulfilled. Okay, Shavuot or Pentecost is fulfilled. The hunting season for the Messiah was Nisan 1, the beginning of the religious year, which we just experienced. But guess what? His second coming is tied to the 7th month. If you believe the Lord is the same yesterday, today, and forever, if he fulfilled the spring feast to the day of his first coming, he will fulfill the fall feast to the day of his second coming. So let's take a look. What do we have in the season for the Messiah to be looking for him in the 7th month? Oh, wow, 7, that's pretty significant, which is the month of Tishri. What do we have? Rosh Hashanah. I believe is on Rosh Hashanah is when the resurrection of the dead will take place. Now, I don't know what year, but I'm telling you the season, the time for the resurrection of the dead, and those of you who have gotten my book, God's Daytime, or the Feast of the Lord, I prove scripturally how the resurrection of the dead will happen some year on Rosh Hashanah. So every year we look for the resurrection of the dead on Rosh Hashanah. But guess what else? The first year of every 7-year Shemitah cycle is when we watch to see if the tribulation begins. How many of you know the prophet Daniel was Jewish? He wasn't a Christian. He wasn't on a Roman pagan calendar. The whole reason they went into Babylon is because they weren't keeping the Shemitah cycle. That's why they were 70 times 7, okay, 490 years, but they didn't keep it every 7th year, so that's why they spent 70 years in Babylon, because they weren't keeping the Shemitah cycle. We know from Daniel, there's 1 week left, right, of 7 years. That cannot begin any moment. It can't begin any year. It has to begin the first year of a Shemitah cycle because it's a Shemitah calendar that's being used. This fall begins a new Shemitah cycle on Rosh Hashanah. So if the tribulation does not start this fall, it can't start for 7 more years. Is everyone following me? When you understand the seasons. So what do we see here? The spring feast had to be fulfilled in order. You can't have Shavuot until he rises from the dead. He can't rise from the dead until he's buried. They're not going to be burying him until he dies. Okay, so they're fulfilled in order. The next feast to be fulfilled is Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, the big blast of the shofar. Okay, and I believe at the first year of a 7-year cycle, this is when the tribulation will begin. Okay, we're going to hear the sound of that shofar some year on Rosh Hashanah, and at that last trump, we will all be resurrected from the dead. I believe Rosh Hashanah is the very day Yeshua is crowned King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Who wants to be there for the coronation ceremony of Yeshua? Party time! Okay, I want to be there for that. Well, guess what? It's going to happen on Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah has to be fulfilled before Yom Kippur can be, before Tabernacles can be. And so also, now it may not be the same year, but during this season, we'll see Yom Kippur fulfilled, where Israel will have the blinders removed. They'll understand Yeshua is the Messiah. That will happen on Yom Kippur. It will happen during the feast of the 7th month. Now, what's amazing about Yom Kippur, it is the year of Jubilee is only proclaimed on Yom Kippur every 50 years. And that is incredible. Now, look at the next thing that happens in the 7th month. season of looking for the Messiah. It's the Feast of Tabernacles. So what does that refer to? Okay, first the tribulation has to begin. Then at some point during the tribulation, some year in that same month on Yom Kippur, Israel realized Yeshua is the Messiah. And then the Feast of Tabernacles will be fulfilled, where he tabernacles among men for 1,000 years. This is why in Zechariah 14, all the nations have to come up and keep the Feast of Tabernacles, because they have to honor the Lord as king over all the earth. Now, there's an amazing thing about the Feast of Tabernacles. Every 7 years, there is what is called the Hakel. Look at Deuteronomy 31, 10 through 12. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, that's what we're approaching. We're in the 7th year. It ends on Rosh Hashanah, in the solemnity of the year of Elise. And then it says, in the Feast of Tabernacles, when all Israel is come to appear before the Lord their God in the place which he shall choose. Okay, you have to understand, every year, only the men were required to go to Jerusalem. The women were never required to go to Jerusalem for the feast. But they always went because they loved to socialize and party and have a good time. But they weren't required. But in the 7th year, or actually in the beginning of the first year of a Shemitah cycle, every 7th year, all the women also were commanded now to come. Look at this. Gather the people together, the men, the women, the children, the stranger that is within your gates, that they may hear, that they may learn and fear the Lord your God and observe to do all the words of this law. Okay, so at the end of every 7 years, at the Feast of Tabernacles, they say, who has the authority to gather everyone together? Only the king of Israel. That's why every 7th year was the king of Israel's responsibility to gather everyone in the land and in the community to come and hear the Torah read. Well, guess what? The first year of a Shemitah cycle, in some year, the king of Israel is going to gather everyone together that they may come before him and hear him as the king read his laws. But that happens the first year of a Shemitah cycle. All right. Now, I just want to make sure, like an airplane, are you all buckled in? Are you ready? This year, and this year only, in the feast of the 7th month, when these 3 feasts fall, it is the beginning of a Shemitah cycle. It is also the year of Jubilee. So what we find this year is incredible in the sense that this year, being the year of Jubilee, we have everything being fulfilled at once. This fall begins a Shemitah cycle. This fall is a year of Jubilee. This fall is the date the king of Israel gathers everyone together. This can only happen every 50 years. What are the odds Messiah is going to wait another 50 years? God forbid. He can do whatever he wants. But what are the odds also? What do we see here? Look at this. This coming Tishri. We have the first year of a Shemitah cycle. We have the year of Jubilee. We have the Hakel. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the slot machines. If you've been to the Vegas airport, they're all over. But what are the odds? Rosh Hashanah is 9/26/22. Sukkot is 10/10 when the Hakel is read. And what do we see? Let's watch our slot machine. Drum roll. There we go. Look at that. The appointed times. The trumpets, the New Year 7-year cycle, Yom Kippur, year of Jubilee, Tabernacles, the Hakel. This can only happen this year and won't again for 50 more years. I want you to realize we're like 5 months away from this event.